Everyone wants to have their biggest year yet, whether that's getting more papers, more grants, more awards, more scientific findings, or even just more recognition. So today we're talking 7 ways in how to be productive and make it your biggest year yet. Hey, Dr. Ken, Dutton-Regester here. And for me, it's the start of a new year. And like everyone else, I'm beginning to think about how can I make this year my most productive yet? How do I get more grants? How do I get more papers? More importantly, how do I get big scientific findings and get them out to the world? So today I thought it'd be a great way to just go over 7 ideas or 7 ways to boost your productivity and make sure that you're on point and hitting your key milestones. Number 1, timeline and career planning. I think it's really important at the start of a year to really just begin to flesh out what you want to achieve in that year. And that's listing all your different goals and beginning to pair them up into different parts of your timeline of the year. So for me, I like to use a big whiteboard and I begin to write down everything that I have going on. So this is all the different projects that I'm currently working on, the different grants that I'm thinking about I'm applying for, as well as awards, as well as which papers I want to get out and when do I think they'll be ready. Once I've done that list, I begin to put them into each of the different months, really beginning to create a timeline of and key milestones with each of those different months. And this really allows you to track your progress throughout the year, making sure that you're hitting those milestones or key performance indicators to really make sure that you're hitting things on point. So when it comes to grants, often they'll open at a certain time frame of the year. So they're very easy indicators that you want to put into your yearly map. Then you want to work backwards. So say, okay, if this is due in May, for example, I'm going to need at least 2 months to be able to write that grant. So I'll put in my calendar or the timeline, March, begin writing grant. Before then, I might need to assemble a team. So then January, begin fleshing out the idea and assembling a team. Hitting each of these different goals and then working backwards makes it a lot more easier to interpret what are the key milestones and breaking a big complex task down into small mini tasks. And I find this is really useful to be able to keep on track. So what I'm doing this year is using 2-month goal updates. So every 2 months, I'm going to go over the list of objectives that I wanted to achieve and then see if I managed to complete them. And if I haven't, look to explain, was I being too ambitious or not ambitious enough? And if there's a lot of tasks being over there, reprioritize and shift them down the calendar. Now, beyond your yearly calendar update, you want to start thinking a bit bigger picture. So thinking about career planning. So you want to be thinking 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead, possibly even 10 years ahead, and what it is you want to be achieving at those milestones. So having this big picture idea is really important because if you're moving up the academic ladder, for example, maybe you're going from postdoc to junior lab head, you're going to need to map out the key funding milestones that you need to achieve, which requires knowing when you need to apply for certain grants and knowing where your track record needs to be in order to be successful. Or maybe you're going to a non-academic position. So maybe you need to outline when do you plan to exit academia and what are the steps that you need to take in order to facilitate that. So point number 2 matches in pretty closely to point number 1, which is checking in with your mentor. Now, it's really important once you have those big picture career goals that you check in with your mentor or your supervisor to really update them on what you're planning on doing. Now, if you're planning on staying in academia, maybe you want to outline how you might be collaborating on grants in the future and starting to pencil that out or giving them the heads up. Or if you're moving to a non-academic position, maybe you just want to give them a heads up that that's what you're planning on doing. Now, a good mentor will be all on top of this, and hopefully they'll be asking you those questions or asking you about what you want to do with your career. But if you don't, you have to actively pursue this. And it may feel awkward at first, but it's really important to do because you never know what type of information they'll give back to you. For example, maybe the lab's going through a bit of a transition phase and having some unpredictable funding. So here they might tell you that around this certain time period, it's unsure or uncertain as to whether funding will come through, and this might be a great time for you to step up and really bring in some money into the lab through your own grant applications. Lastly, it's really important to have good communication with your mentor or supervisor. So checking in with them, it's a really good idea regardless of what you talk about, because having a good relationship with your mentor is really important into a successful career. So point number 3, it's a bit of an obvious one. It's one we hear a lot about, but it's really important. And that's just having a bit of an update of how you're doing health-wise. And we're talking not only just your general health, but what are your sleeping habits? Are you getting your typical or recommended 8 hours of sleep per day? Are you having variable sleep? I know for me, I'm a really bad person at trying to keep to a regular sleep schedule, but that's something that is really recommended in order to increase your productivity moving forward. It may seem like burning that midnight oil or going deep into the night feels more productive, but if the next day you're absolutely wrecked and tired and your brain's not on point, then it's going to affect your productivity the next day. And if you look at that whole productivity schedule over a week, for example, maybe you're not getting the most out of your week. Another important thing is eating. So eating healthy and regularly is also really important to keep your brain active. Now for me, I like to do bulk cooking where possible, mainly for my lunches. So on the weekends, I can do a big lunch bulk cook, freeze them down, and so when it comes to each day of the week, I just grab my pre-frozen meal, and that's what I eat for lunch. It means no sneaky takeaway food during the week. It means the meal's already there, and it means all I need to do is put it into the microwave, and then 3-5 minutes later, I'm ready to eat my lunch, eat it, get back into work. So looking for these ways that you can multitask is really useful. And moving on that, getting more exercise. I found that during my PhD, once I started running or becoming more physically active, that really boosted my mental performance, and that bled into making better experiments that worked more effectively, and which means I didn't need to repeat things as much. So being active is really useful. Now, again, multitasking is a great way to do this. So now I often either run or ride into work. This is time that if I was driving in, I would be thinking to a podcast, but now I can do 2 things at once. I can get into work, but then also get my physical activity, and I don't have to schedule that in to the rest of my week. So think multitasking in order to be healthy. So point number 4 is to look at your day and structure it more effectively. And this really comes down to knowing when you were the most productive. Now, a good book that I recommend is Deep Work by Cal Newport. I read this last year, and I found it was a really good book that gives you an overview of how best to structure your day to get the most out of it. Now, some of the key takeaways from this book is making sure you do all your hard or heavy mind thinking activities early in the day. In fact, the earlier the better, before you start getting bombarded with emails and people trying to approach you and ask a question. They say, if you can, wake up super early. I've been trying to get up between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. to do about 2 hours work before my son wakes up. And I find that this period can be really effective when my brain's really switched on and the house is completely quiet and I can really focus on doing some writing tasks. Now, in this book, Cal also talks about the importance of structuring your day and making sure you set out individual tasks and relative timeframes of how long it's going to take to do each of them to really make sure that you're sticking to a specific schedule. Now, you can do this at the beginning of the day, but you're going to be dipping into your most productive time. So ideally, it's best to do your daily planning either right at the end of the night, the day before, or maybe just before you go home, so that you have a clear idea as soon as you get in the lab, you need to do this, 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 and this, and these are the exact timeframes. Lastly, once you've set those individual tasks, make sure that you're protective of those times. So if you've got a specific meeting and you know that you've scheduled 30 minutes stick to that 30-minute schedule. Don't go over. You can go under, that's fine, but really make sure and set the expectations as soon as you come into that meeting that you've got 30 minutes and then you need to leave. Setting that expectation up front, particularly if it's on a one-on-one meeting, can really allow the conversation to move through quicker without getting distracted or introducing any other types of content or materials that aren't specific or relevant to that particular meeting. Point number 5 is turn off those social media notifications. Staying focused is critical to achieving a lot of work and being productive. So if you're constantly seeing these little pings coming at you through your phone, that is an absolute disruptor of any productivity. So we're talking all social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, but it may also be other things. So email notifications. If you're working on your desktop and you've set your Outlook or your email server to ping you whenever a new message comes in, that's just going to distract you and disrupt your train of thought. I started turning off my notifications last year and I found it has been really useful. It means that I'm only looking at social media when I know I've scheduled it in and I know it's not disrupting my writing. Now, that being said, if you happen to be subscribed to the channel and you've hit the notification bell, feel free to leave that notification on because hearing this content as it comes out is really important. So point number 6 is update as you go. This one is a really good productivity hack. So for me, I tend to get a little bit lazy and maybe I don't polish up all my results and all my graphs and write down exactly what I did as I do them, which makes paper writing incredibly painful because I have to go back, think about what I did 2 years ago, reinterpret my lab book, and then figure out how to polish this great new graph and get it into the paper. But if you're doing this as you go along, it makes paper writing so much easier. The same goes with your CV, for example. When it comes to grant writing and you need to put your track record in, having an up-to-date CV is just so much easier if it's all up to date. So if you haven't done it and you have to go back and think about what you did over the last 6 months, what awards you did, what talks you did, it's incredibly painful. The same goes for if you're in the lab, keeping your lab book up to date, as well as even thinking about different ideas. So if you come up with an idea, write it down as soon as possible, because then you've got this resource there that you can always tap back into. And same thing, lab meetings, seminars, any conversations that you talk about, write them down because your memory is really bad. Maybe it's just my memory that's really bad, but I found having that written down is really important and boosts your productivity down the line. And lastly, point number 7, clean up. Now this one sounds incredibly painful, and yes, it is a little bit, but I think it's really important that a clean environment leads to a better frame of mind. So whether that's cleaning up your immediate office space or cleaning up the lab that you may have cleaned or neglected to clean for a while, or even just tidying up your lab book in a different way. So just make sure things are nice and tidy, because it's surprising how much a cluttered environment can slowly begin to affect, your thought processes. And maybe it comes down to trying to find something, and if you're digging through piles of papers, that can really slow down your productivity. So as frustrating as it is, clean up, spend a day, maybe a couple of days, and just clean the immediate environment up, and you should be good to go for a productive year ahead. So that's it. That's 7 ways to boost your productivity and have your biggest year yet. So if you like those tips, give me a pipette thumbs up. And next week, if you happen to be applying for a grant, we're going to be talking 9 ways in how to get grant research funding.